Hello everyone again, room 108, Mount Vernon High School, Substack and video channels are live. I'm here again at the undisclosed location in the Bronx, and I'm talking to you today about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I talked about this with students who are now going into their junior year in high school. I spoke about it with them when it started. They were in ninth grade. Those students are now going into 11th grade. They're going to be upperclassmen in September. And I just want to recap because I get questions on this sometimes in person when it comes to these kinds of affairs. Because I told those students that it was basically, despite what you were seeing in the press, you're going to have a Russian victory. And it wasn't that hard to see. If you're watching the press now, you're seeing much less of the screaming and howling about stand for Ukraine, stand with Ukraine, put the Ukrainian flag in your Twitter and Facebook and Instagram bio. You're seeing less slavish devotion to Ukraine in the corporate press. They're doing a very clumsy and what's going to be very difficult pivot, kind of like steering a filled, gigantic, very large crude oil carrier tanker ship. They're trying to steer that thing and change the direction. Very difficult to do because there's an inevitable loss coming for Ukraine. Why? Because Russia makes things. What do I mean by that? The United States is a consumption country. We consume things. The manufacturing sector has been hollowed out. Whatever's left of a mining or oil refining sector is basically gone. The United States has not opened up a new oil refinery, I think, since the late 1970s. I was in kindergarten in the late 1970s. And Russia mines for gold and silver and uranium. Uranium is what's used in nuclear power, so we're talking energy with uranium. Staying on the topic of energy, Russia is a member of OPEC. They produce millions of barrels of oil a day. Yes, a day. You should know that the world uses 100 million barrels of oil a day. Okay? So you can glue your hands to the sidewalk and scream no more oil all you like. It's going to have no effect, except on my stock market account. So Russia also refines oil, make it into natural gas and petroleum products. They refine whatever you want to call the process to create usable uranium rods for nuclear power. So Russia is a big player in the energy industry, in the mining industry, and they have factories that produce stuff. Now we are told that Ukraine, backed by a country that does nothing but consume fast food, idiotic 15-second dance videos on TikTok. We consume shows created in Hollyweird about all kinds of bizarre, demented things. We consume that. We get stuff shipped to our homes and we consume whatever's in those cardboard boxes, right? We consume like crazy. We don't really create much. So Ukraine, which is a tiny country, half of it speaks Russian in the first place, the eastern half. That Ukraine, backed by a country that has been effectively taken over by foreign agents, and a population that does nothing but consume, that side is going to defeat a Russia that creates real stuff with real value, a lot of it in the energy industry, and they don't need NATO. Russia doesn't need the United States. It doesn't need Britain. It doesn't need Western Europe. It doesn't need any of that stuff. It creates its own energy. It creates its own materials. It creates its own refined goods. We were told from the corporate press that Ukraine basically was going to win. Russia was going to run out of weaponry in 2 weeks. How many Russia going to run out of weapons in 2 weeks stories did you hear? They ran that story every 2 or 3 weeks for about 15 months. Notice they don't do that anymore. You should ask yourself why. So the press told you all of these things, all of them wrong. So I'm not a geopolitical expert, but when my 9th graders a year and a half ago asked me about this Russia-Ukraine stuff, I told them Russia's going to win in about 2 months. Now, I was wrong about the time. Way off. I mean, way off. But what they decided to do in Russia, what Putin decided to do, was play the long game. And Putin is not in charge of the war effort in Russia. He's got generals and there's a military just like every other large country. But Russia's playing the long game. They're like, all right, we produce our own stuff. We have our own currency. Remember Biden saying that the ruble will be rubble? That was probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but you had people repeating it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Oh, the ruble's going to be worthless. The ruble's going to be rubble. Well, the ruble is stronger than ever. It's in effect backed by all of the tangible goods that Russia produces. And you're seeing now a pivot in the disgusting corporate press that is controlled by a very select few. You're seeing this kind of clumsy pivot to negotiated peace. How are we going to exit this conflict? Things like that. So this is the kind of stuff we talk about in room 108, and before that in room 251, and before that room 250, 255, right? You know the drill, 246, 237. You guys remember the room numbers. So these are the things that come up a lot. And we talk about them clearly. And all I do is share my knowledge with students and admit it when I'm wrong. And people get a little weirded out when I say stuff like that, because who in, what was it, March or February or March of 2021 was saying stuff like that, right? I was clear, like, this is not happening. And no, the United States isn't going to roll in with the armored carriers and the Marines and go in. Really? Well, who do you know? What politician do you know is going to say, oh, you got to go fight for Ukraine, for America? Right? You have any idea how the military is having trouble recruiting people? The recruitment enlistment numbers are as low as the last time they were this low was 1972. And that was in the Vietnam debacle, where Americans were told by their disgusting, compliant corporate press that if Vietnam went communist, the whole world was going to go communist. Domino theory. Another bit of nonsense. And I'm going to say one last thing about the press, and then I'll tell you how this relates to kind of us, the regular people. People talk about, why I have real problems with people who follow the corporate press, any corporate outlet. That goes from the New York Times to the Washington Post to Fox to NPR, all of them, CBS, MSNBC, CNN. Come on, right? I mean, stop it. Let me tell you something. It was somewhere around 15, 20 years ago. There was a Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, was busted. There's an FBI file that's now declassified. Foreign agents were infiltrating his office, and they'd found out that he was basically trafficking young boys into his Washington, D.C. penthouse. Now, the New York Times was given this information. This is the New York Times. I believe Hastert was a Republican. And you would have thought that the New York Times would go just ballistic with this, right? They'd go nuclear and get one of these Republicans. They're just terrible, right? No. The New York Times ignored that part of the story. And what they did was they trumpeted the part of the story where he used campaign funds to solicit male prostitutes and bring them to his compound, his penthouse in Washington, D.C. And that's what they got him on. So if you're wondering why I don't believe what's on the cover of the New York Times or CNN or these places, that's just one of many things. I'm just doing this from memory. I'm in the park. I don't have notes. This is just what's there. So if you're wondering why I have such contempt for the corporate press and why I strongly urge you to ignore CNN, Fox, the New York Times, MSNBC, right? This is the New York Times going after a Republican, and they ignored what was in black and white, saying, okay, there are young boys being trafficked, all kinds of illegality there, to Hastert. Nope, Times wouldn't run it. They protected him. This is a Democratic liberal newspaper, quote unquote. And Hastert, again, I believe he was a Republican. But even if he wasn't, isn't the New York Times all the news that's fit to print? Aren't they the fourth estate? Aren't they supposed to be the place where those intrepid reporters keep people in power in check? Come on. So when you heard what you heard about Russia and Ukraine in the corporate press, all I had to do was hear what they said and go the opposite way. Now, I know more about that. I invest in energy, so I know Russia's role in the world to a strong degree, especially when it comes to oil, gas, and uranium and gold. So it wasn't, the mental calculus was not complicated. I'm not overly bright. I just recognize some patterns and I read a lot. So that's how that went. Let me end this in a couple of minutes with a parallel to what's going on today. That idea of having tangible value, tangible skill, value, notice, is a word I keep using a lot. You don't need to be afraid of what is a confusing and complicated world today if you're able to admit mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes along the way and be ready for that. But if you can create value for people, what do I mean by that? Can you sell butter at a farmer's market? Can you bake bread that people love? Can you grow microgreens? Are you a masseuse? Do you have a small restaurant or a grill that people love and you treat your employees with respect? Do you know where your food comes from? Can you teach people that? Maybe you're a nutritional expert. I don't know. But if you can do that, if you can show up on time, create value, preferably something tangible, like you grow apples, or you are a talented preschool teacher who imparts literacy onto young children. I don't really know what you're good at. But maybe you're the best baseball coach in your county. I don't really know. But this global citizen, right, let's hollow out the United States and think globally, was a scam. And people called it a scam at the time. And of course they were maligned, and they were called Republicans, and they were called conservatives and libertarians. And go listen to Ron Paul's speeches from about 1996 to 2008. And you'll hear what he had to say. That whole thing was a joke and a way to hollow out the United States at the expense of the uber elite. So, the regular people were hollowed out at their expense, and the uber elite benefited from it greatly, right? That's why you have the wealth disparity and the wealth gap and the wage gap and all the stuff you're noticing. You're not wrong. It's there. But all that globalist stuff and New World Order stuff it worked as intended. So the way to navigate is to not be afraid, as I repeat almost every time on these things, and be able to create something, preferably something tangible, but it can be a skill set that people can use, recognize, and respect. Because if you could do that in your local area with 10 people, do you know, are you friends with 10 people within 10 miles? Can you explain what you do and what you provide in a paragraph that a 10th grader will understand? If those things are in your wheelhouse, if those things are doable, you can stop being afraid. You don't need to be afraid. They're always trying to make you afraid. Oh, a germ is going to kill everybody. That didn't happen. The earth is, I keep hearing the earth is boiling. What's this boiling? Or boiling Europe, right? The global warming people have gone off the rails, right? I'm sitting here, it's 75 degrees in the middle of summer. Oh, that's you, sir. You're such a denialist. That's just the weather. We're talking about climate. Yeah, but when it goes the other way, when it was 97 degrees last week, that day matters. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I just, I don't buy into what the top of the pyramid corporate press and their minions say, and you shouldn't either. Create something tangible, provide something tangible or a skill that's valuable. This value thing is big. Can you explain it to someone in a paragraph in the 10th grade? And are you close friends with 10 people within 10 miles? And if those things are there, I think you're going to be okay. And that's really the lesson today. That's how I talk to freshmen. That's how I'm going to try to talk with mixed results every year to the 9th graders coming in September. And I go from there. All right? Talk to you guys soon. I'll see you next video. Thank you.